And welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here every week talking to interesting people and visiting about topical issues. And we welcome Bob Blackburn back to the show this week.
Yes, Bob runs the Oklahoma History Center, and we're going to be talking about a project, among other things, that he's got going on Oklahoma rock and roll. It's the historical beginnings of rock and roll in Oklahoma and what the History Center is doing about it.
Oklahoma has offered a lot to the world of rock and roll, and Bob Blackburn's going to chronicle all that today. He'll tell us about that effort on The Verdict.
A greener planet, cleaner air, a healthy economy, national security, a smaller deficit and a stronger dollar, green jobs, better jobs, energy independence, warmth and light and transportation. The reasons Chesapeake champions natural gas include your children and grandchildren, your community and its economy, its schools, roads, and charities. More hope for the future. More confidence in the direction of our nation. The need for energy that's clean, affordable, abundant, and very American. These are the reasons Chesapeake champions natural gas every day.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Very pleased today to welcome back for his second appearance on the Verdict, Dr. Bob Blackburn, who's the Executive Director of the Oklahoma History Center. Bob did his master's and PhD work at Oklahoma State University in history. He's a prolific writer. He has appeared numerous times on the History Channel on cable, discussing historical events and facts. He's been the Executive Director at the Oklahoma History Center since 1999, so he's 10 years in his current position. And we're sure glad you joined us again.
Thank you, Ken. It's good to be here.
Glad to have you.
Good to see you, Bob. You got a new project working that I think is going to have a lot of people excited. Rock and roll. Are we old enough where rock and roll is now a history?
A lot of people are surprised about this, but one thing that I've tried to do, and I think our staff and board have tried to do, is to make history relevant. And when you think about Oklahoma, you think land runs and Indians and astronauts somewhat. But we want to connect with people. One of the biggest and most important selling points that we can use is to connect with people, shared memory. All of us have shared memory of Oklahoma City or Oklahoma, different businesses, politics, whatever it might be. Well, music pervades our culture. And for 50 years, Oklahomans have been making rock and roll. We were there at the beginning. 3 of the members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame are Oklahomans. Bob Wills, who electrified sound and sped up the beat. Charlie Christian, who made the guitar a lead instrument in a big band and got kind of jazzy and brought jazz into the rock and roll, and Woody Guthrie, who made lyrics relevant, telling a story. You put the guitar, electrification, and storytelling together, and then you combine other parts of Oklahoma history, such as gospel music, rhythm and blues, soul even, and suddenly you have rock and roll. And so for 50 years, this has been part of our shared memory. And what we've tried to do with this exhibit and the book and the programming we're doing, the radio show that is now running on all of the NPR affiliates in the state, is to show people how rich this history really is and some of the Oklahomans and Oklahoma events that really illustrate how Oklahomans have been a leader in music as well as everything else.
You got a book I want to hold up as you talk about it. What's this about?
This is a book. It's Another Hot Oklahoma Night, which is the lead lyrics or the refrain from a song by The Call, a famous Oklahoma rock and roll band, and it's a rock and roll story. There are more than 350 photographs. So if someone grew up watching Ronnie K on TV with the scene and the scene dancers, we have photographs. If someone was a hit or someone who was a fan of the Five Americans who sang Western Union, they can see photographs in there, or Leon Russell or Wanda Jackson and the Rockabilly. And we've organized it by themes: the Tulsa sound, the Norman sound, the Stillwater sound of the red dirt music, the influence of the guitar, the influence of different artists. And so it's really a kind of a stroll through shared memory.
Where can one get this book?
You can buy it. I like to support our retail stores in the community, Full Circle, of course, one of our best partners, and other bookstores, but we also sell it at the Oklahoma History Center. And the advantage of buying it there is that they can see the exhibit while they're in the building.
And so the rock and roll exhibit is currently on display?
Yes, sir. It opened a couple of months ago, and it takes up almost 6,000 square feet of space.
My goodness.
Which is a good size exhibit. Wow. And we start with the pioneers of rock and roll, and there's some interactive exhibits. We let people take their photographs playing the guitar in a garage setting.
Well, of all the times that someone comes up to you and says, "I didn't know that person was an Oklahoman," give us some highlights of the exhibit and the people that you might not have known were Oklahomans but are part of this.
Well, a lot of people remember David Gates and Bread.
Sure.
A lot of hits
Tulsa.
in the 60s and 70s, exactly, from Tulsa. So you knew that. Well, David went to Hollywood, as did Leon Russell and J.J. Cale and that generation of rock and roll pioneers. And while Leon went off into more rhythm and blues and folk rock, David went into pop. And he wrote a lot of hit songs, recorded a lot of hit songs, wrote scores for movies, and really got into the Hollywood scene. And so a lot of people don't know about his career after Bread. Another group is the Collins Kids, and for a lot of folks who are into that transition period of Elvis Presley in the mid-50s, when we go from the big band sound and some early jazz and morphing into what we would know as rhythm and blues and rock and roll, rockabilly is the transitional musical theme. And of course, we all know Wanda Jackson, one of Oklahoma's favorite daughters.
He's been on our show.
He's been on your show. But the Collins Kids from Tulsa, these were kids of a dairy farmer north of Tulsa. And Larry was about 12 years old when he learned to play the guitar. And Laurie, his sister, was a singer in the church. And they adapted this rockabilly sound. And Larry became a virtuoso guitar player. By the time he was 14, he was on one of the biggest television shows in Los Angeles on country and western and rockabilly. And so he was there at the very time of Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and some of the pioneers in rock and roll. But yet the Collins Kids and Wanda were there making that same history. And Larry and Laurie have been back for a performance and will be back in October when we celebrate rockabilly again.
So you're going to have a big event?
Yeah, where will that be?
Well, part of the celebration will be downtown with a Halloween event that the Oklahoma Gazette sponsors. And then the night before, on Friday night, we'll have a concert at the History Center in conjunction with the exhibit. So we'll have a Wanda Jackson event again, the Collins Kids again, and some of these pioneers.
Let's talk about your radio series that you're doing. Tell our viewers as much as you can about it.
Well, when we started the project, we've been researching and preparing for this rock and roll exhibit for almost 2 years. Well, in the process of collecting more than 120 hours of interviews with rock and roll pioneers. We now have Leon Russell on tape, Gary Busey, for example. He started off in a band before he went into movies. Well, we met a lot of the people who were pioneers, and one of those pioneers was Steve Ripley. And Steve Ripley learned to play guitar here in Oklahoma City as a kid. Gene Sullivan of Wiley and Gene, the old musical group. Gene had a recording studio, and Steve cut his first records. He was on Ronnie Kay's The Scene. He went off and became an engineer for Leon, had his own recording studios in Tulsa, toured with Bob Dylan as lead guitarist, makes guitars. Steve is a gem in Oklahoma history. He also had a group called the Tractors in the 80s that had a couple of hits. But Steve and I were talking about this, and he was an OSU radio major. And he wanted to do a radio show, had been dreaming about it, and he had done one radio show based on the Tractors, and his label had supported the production. I listened to it, and I said, we've got to do this. And so it was one of those where you add another project on to something that's already underfunded. But we had to
way to go, Bob.
Thank you. You two know the story. You get in over your head too. But suddenly I wanted to do this radio show, so we found a way to do 20 shows, 1 hour each, on the roots of rock and roll in Oklahoma. And starting on the 4th of July weekend, they started airing on KGOU, KOSU, KCCU, and KWGS in Tulsa. And so now we're saturating the state on NPR affiliates with this radio show. And Steve will combine songs, bet you didn't know, and he'll play a song and he'll comment on it. Then he'll interview the people who are in the song or who are influenced by a song. So he might be interviewing Leon, which that's been in every show because he toured with Leon. But others have been interviewed. J.J. Cale is a frequent visitor on the show, and Wanda Jackson again. And it's a very creative show that I think will go to satellite at some point. It's that good and that creative.
I listened to some of it just this past weekend. You're right, very well done, and he explains, he sells himself as an authority, and you buy it really quickly because he knows what he's talking about. Bob Blackburn is our guest. A lot going on at the Oklahoma History Center. We'll get into that when we return on The Verdict.
My name is Wyatt Parker. I am 20 years old. I am a composer, and I am a Chickasaw. The way I prefer to express myself is through music. I like all the obvious guys, you know, Mozart, Beethoven. The way that I like to come up with music is really not to come up with it at all. I just like for it to kind of appear in my head. It's about listening. You have to be a good listener in music as in life. I would say the Chickasaw Nation stands for its people. I would want to be known as a Chickasaw composer who is trying to do great things with music. With all the opportunities that the Chickasaw Nation is offering its people, it's a great time to be a Chickasaw.
Home values are down in some states, but not in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's home values have increased 4.2% during the past 12 months. Unlike some states where home values have decreased as much as 20%. Good thing you're in Oklahoma. There may be real estate problems in some states, but there has never been a better time than now to buy or sell a home in Oklahoma. One of the most affordable states in the country, Oklahomans are buying and selling homes every day, and an Oklahoma Realtor can show you how. Good thing you're in Oklahoma.
Okiwani is an Indian name for a place where children play. When we obtained the camp, we found a lot of oil debris left in the woods. We saw a commercial about how the oil and natural gas industry cleans up old oil well sites. We called the OERB, and they agreed to remove tons of concrete and steel. It didn't cost us a thing. Thousands of children have left their footprints on this land. Thanks to the oil and gas industry, they will for a long time to come.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. Bob Blackburn is our guest. We've been discussing, as we closed out the last segment, the rock and roll exhibit that's currently going on, but the radio component is important as well to wrap up.
Yes, I'd like for you to tell our viewers how they can get on your website and find out when they can listen to this radio show, because I'm sure a lot of them will want to, and what's the source they need to pursue.
I would suggest that they go to our website, which is okhistory.org. It's easy to remember.
We'll give that again at the end of the show.
Okay, so they can go to okhistory.org, and there is a link for the radio show and the rock and roll exhibit, so they can see what's going on with the exhibit, our performances, because we have several events coming up. But they also have a link to Steve Ripley's website that's more behind the scenes, and see some of the interviews or hear some of the interviews at greater length. So that's a good way to find that.
Most people are aware of the History Center in Oklahoma City, but you guys have a number of associations with other museums throughout the state. Can you kind of explain the setup there and how people from all over the state of Oklahoma can enjoy Oklahoma's history?
Good question. We have 33 museums and historic sites affiliated with the Oklahoma Historical Society. Our organization has been around since 1893, when we started collecting newspapers. Today we have 33 million pages of newspapers in our collections, and we just got a grant from the Excellence in Ethics and Journalism Foundation to digitize everything before 1923. 8 million pages will be digitized online over the next 3 years, thanks to the generosity of that foundation. But we've collected artifacts, manuscripts, 7 million photographs, but also museums and sites, such as Fort Gibson, which is linked to the Battle of Honey Springs near the Muskogee area. And Fort Gibson, established 1824 for Indian removal. It was the westernmost fort on the American frontier. It was the heart of economic development. It was there, the focal point for the Civil War. 80 engagements were fought in Oklahoma during the Civil War. And that, with the Battle of Honey Springs, which was the largest battle in the territory on July 17, 1863, we promote that as a unit. But we have other sites, such as the Overholser here in Oklahoma City, the Frank Phillips Home in Bartlesville. We have the Sod House in western Oklahoma, our Route 66 Museum in Clinton that I'd recommend. And so we partner within our own organization, but we also partner with the Cherokees. The Cherokee Nation just gave us a very generous grant to work with them on expanding our story from Sequoia's home site. Sequoia, developer of the original celeberry, the only original celeberry in the Western Hemisphere, with the Merle home in 1840s, Antebellum home near Tahlequah in Fort Gibson. We're working with the Chickasaws on their cultural center near Sulphur. We're working with Fort Sill on the new Museum of Artillery and War on the Southern Plains. So we partner with communities. In Tulsa right now, we're working with Mayor Taylor and the George Kaiser Family Foundation to develop a new museum on popular culture. And so we're working on what we have open now. We're trying to bring in collections like rock and roll for future exhibits, and working with partners to say, what do we still need to do? How can we be more efficient? How can we adopt a new business plan that works for the new Oklahoma? And I really believe that our personality is being reformed right now. Just as Oklahoma's personality originally developed between 1898 and 1907, we're going through another transitional time period in our history. And coming out of that, the people who adjust and develop the new plans, whether it's a museum or a business, are going to be the ones who do the best on accomplishing their mission. And for us, that's to collect, preserve, and share history, whether it's through exhibits or radio shows or through educational programs in museums or sites. So we're in that right now.
Well, you've got a lot going on. Has the downturn in the economy affected your operations any?
It has. We suffered a 7% budget cut, but I'm not complaining about that. All other state agencies other than education had the same cut. So it's incumbent on us to think of the Historical Society as mission-driven rather than saving jobs alone. Of course, the heart of our organization is our staff. We have a great staff. But over $1 million has had to come out of our budget this year, but we're not going to slow down. With this digitization grant, we'll carry on there. We're emphasizing more weddings at the History Center because that's a stream of revenue that can replace some of the revenue we're losing through appropriations. We're finding ways to partner, to be more efficient. to keep the collecting activity strong, to share as much as we can. So I think this is a short-term problem that may start a conversation with others for long-term solutions.
I know you have a number of visitors to go through the center. Still, I'm sure there's people that have never been in the building. What are they missing?
Well, they're missing an overview of Oklahoma history that will surprise almost everyone. One of the most common comments I get is, "This is better than the Smithsonian." And that makes me very proud, because that was our standard. We have over 50 video elements, another 100 audio elements, a lot of interactive exhibits. We think it would take about 4 full days to see the museum, and obviously no one's going to do that. We hope to give everyone a chance to see what they're interested in. It could be our pink kitchen from the 1950s, because people say, "Oh, my grandmother had a kitchen like that," or some people say, "My kitchen still looks like that." Or they might like political history, where they can see campaign literature, not only from the Indian Territory, but from Robert S. Kerr's campaigns or Don Nichols' campaigns, and then bring back these memories. Or it could be Indian history. They can see, if it's Memorial Day weekend, they may want to see Jack Zink's race car that won the 1956 Indianapolis race. Or they might want to see Hank Iba's jacket or Bud Wilkinson's fedora. Or they may want to see Jim Thorpe's gold medals. We've got a little bit for everyone, and I think that's what surprises people. And the quality of the presentation, I think, is another. But we want people to come back time and time again.
You mentioned something a minute ago I wanted to come back to, and that is that there's sometimes weddings and other events out there. You have an absolutely exquisite building there to show off a lot of wonderful information. Are you open for groups and the like to pre-schedule events there?
Yes, sir. When we did the business plan and the program brief for the History Center in 1998 and 1999, we had various components. We wanted to, of course, take care of the collections. We wanted to be able to offer things in a new way. But there was a major component in there that we wanted the Oklahoma History Center to be a community center. We want this to be Oklahoma's town hall, where we can come together. And whether you're from Tulsa or Oklahoma City or from Antlers or Frederick, you should be able to come in and see what we share in common. And this is something new for the state. We were divided for much of the 20th century. Very parochial. We were from the Cherokee Outlet, or we're from the Choctaw Nation, or we're Tulsa, or we're Oklahoma City. Those walls are breaking down. We're a place to celebrate together. So I want Rotary from the entire state to come in and use that facility. I want reunions from Will Rogers High School in Tulsa to come in and have their reunion. I want families to have their family reunions, or Langston graduates to come in. And if it's weddings, these ceremonies are now part of what binds that family together. We should be part of their family story. We should be part of their community story. So the more we can get people there, the better we can emphasize that shared history.
You have that airplane hanging in the big room there that you walk into when you
The
walk
Devon
in.
Great Hall.
Yeah, and that's Wiley Post's?
It was Wiley Post. It's a replica of
Yeah.
his when he made. The original is in the Smithsonian. It is a national treasure. But Wiley Post was the son of sharecroppers who made a few bad decisions. He was convicted of a felony, did hard time at Granite, got out, job in the oil patch, hard times again, lost an eye in an accident, but he took his claim and bought an old airplane, became a great pilot. Oil companies wanting to sell aviation fuel, learns to fly, is the first to circumnavigate the globe with a co-pilot in 1931. He says that's not good enough. 2 years later, does it by himself. He's a national, international hero. And of course, in another airplane, he and Will Rogers would die in Alaska. But the Winnie Mae survived. We have the replica, and allows us to tell that story of a great Oklahoman.
We're going to have to draw that to a close. Bob, thanks for coming on The Verdict. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Kent and I'll have a final word after this.
What would you do?
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online. Always great to have Bob Blackburn on the show. A lot of interesting things happening at the Oklahoma History Center. You can get more information on what's going on out there at their website, okhistory.org, or you can visit our website, theverdict.tv. Tell us about a show you'd like to see. For Kent, I'm Mick. We'll see you next week on The Verdict.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.